Maybe. All right, there we go. So just tell me when you want me to go to the next one and I'll just do it from here.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so again, hi, my name is Meredith. Brad, I work at Leader Dogs for the Blind. Clearly not a tech person. Work with the dogs and people. So I'm presenting. I thank you guys so much for inviting me to present to you today. We'll talk a little bit more later about what a GDMI or Guide Dog Mobility Instructor is. Again, I'm also one of the team supervisors for our training team. We're going to go over the basics of what the training looks like for a guide dog, what they go through when they get onto campus and start working with the guide dog instructors, and what behaviors we teach with positive reinforcement to help them become a successful guide dog. I'm planning to talk for about 20 minutes and then leaving 10-ish minutes for questions or comments or anything people want to discuss. I also have some extra topics to talk about if there aren't any questions. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I know Leslie showed these statistics in her presentation, but I wanted to go over them again just to really hit home why we're doing what we're doing, why these guide dogs are so important for people who are blind or visually impaired. So I'm going to go through them again real quick. So that worldwide, there are 285 million people who are visually impaired. And of that, just in the US alone, there's 1.3 million people who are legally blind. And this year, 75,000 people will become blind in the United States. And of those numbers, for the next slide, a few more statistics. You don't mind moving to the next one?
I did. Hold on. Huh?
There we go.
There you go. Okay.
I'm seeing it now. So 90% of people who live in low income 90% of visually impaired people live in low income settings, and 60% are unemployed, and 43 live and report some degree of depression. And these are of all of those people on the next slide, 10% travel independently. This is what's so important to us because we want to help people who are blind or visually impaired who want to be independent to have those skills and that knowledge to be able to be independent and go about their lives in the way that they want to, because they can, it's just they might not have the tools to do so. And we want to make sure that we at Leader Dog increase that percentage of people who are independent travelers. So my next slide, I think we just passed over, which is fine. It's a picture of a client working a guide dog, and it just says guide dog training on it. I'm going to specifically cover using a guide dog in the training and techniques it takes to create a successful guide dog team. And this photo is a client and their guide dog working down the sidewalk. So now this slide is how does someone become a guide dog mobility instructor? So I mentioned a minute ago that my title is a guide dog mobility instructor, or GDMI for short. And what that means is certified guide dog mobility instructors were certified through IGDF, which is the International Guide Dog Federation. So we have to go through an apprenticeship, which is 3 years on the job of working under another certified instructor, working with dogs, working with clients. There's classes we have to take. We have to pass a series of 3 exams. There's a written portion and an oral portion that we have to do to pass, and that takes about 3 years. It's about a year per level. To get to that point where you start the apprenticeship, a lot of people do this differently. So we have a lot of people who have undergraduate degrees from universities in anything. Mine, I have an undergraduate degree from Michigan State University in animal science, but mine is in dairy cattle management was my focus. So not related to dogs at first. We have people with theater degrees, teaching degrees, people who have masters in counseling. So just any array of educational backgrounds to get here. Some people didn't go to college, but they have a applicable amount of experience working in a kennel or dog training in general. So we come from all different walks. I found out about Leader Dogs because in college I was a volunteer puppy raiser for them. Realized that service dog work was more of the direction I wanted to go than cows. I know, again, big flip, but I'm glad I did it. Was able to get an apprenticeship here at Leader Dog, and I've been here about 5 years. And like it was mentioned, I'm working on my master's in O&M, and that is not required as a guide dog mobility instructor, but I am excited for how it will help me work with my clients. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the life cycle of a leader dog. We're going to have some more presentations later on that go more specifically into the breeding and puppy raiser aspect of it, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about that right now. I'm just going to do a brief overview of the life cycle of a leader dog. So the leader dogs start with, we have our own breeding program in-house. So we breed our dogs specifically for this job. They're kept in volunteer host homes, and those host homes actually have the puppies born in their homes and take care of them for the first 7 weeks of life. And then the puppies come into Leader Dog, they have an evaluation for about a week, and then they on campus, and then they are picked up by volunteer puppy raisers. And those puppy raisers then raise these puppies for a year, teaching them the basics of obedience and social behavior and how to be out in public and just getting used to a lot of different environments. So they go over all of those things in puppy raising. So then when the dogs are about 12 to 14 months old, they're returned to Leader Dog, which is where I pick them up to begin their formal training. It's usually a little bit of time, a couple of weeks when they come in for training before I pick them up, where they have a health screening and evaluation before GDMIs pick up their groups of dogs. And we'll start with anywhere between 7 to 10 dogs per person. And there is about a 50% graduation rate. So we'll start with 7 to 10, and then we'll finish with about 4 or 5 dogs typically that do graduate. And of those dogs that we decide for the betterment of the dog that they don't want to be a guide dog, some just choose they don't want to, some for health reasons or various different things. They just, being a guide dog is not the best life for them. So they will either go to an alternative career or they will be adopted as pets. We have a long list of people who want to adopt these dogs. So the dogs that I do have in training, again, it's about 4 months long, and I'll go more into detail with this in future slides of the specifics of that, but it's about a 4-month-long training cycle. During that time, as a guide dog instructor, I'm not only training the dogs, but I'm looking at our list of clients and their applications, and I'm matching the dogs to the clients who would be a good fit for each other. The clients get accepted into one of our training models. So a lot of clients will actually come to our Leader Dog campus. We have a residential campus here with a dorm room-like facility, and so we call that class. So many clients will come into class, but then we also offer home delivery, so we will bring the dog to people. So we match everybody up, clients and dogs, and what mode of class they're getting to get their guide dog, and then they come in, or we go to see them. And if it's a home delivery, it's about 10 days because it's one instructor and one client and that dog just working together in their home area. If the clients come to class, before COVID-19 and that whole situation, we were roughly at a 4 clients to 1 instructor ratio. Now it's about 2 to 1. And so they're here for 3 weeks of working with us, getting used to their dog, becoming a successful team, and then going back home. And so then the dog and the client will work together for hopefully a very long time, successfully and safely, until the dog is typically about 8 or 9 years old. Again, it varies kind of depending on the dog. And then at that point, the client will retire the dog, and in which case they have some options. A lot of the clients will obviously keep their dogs as a pet for the duration of the dog's life. Some clients are unable to keep their dog if it's not a service dog anymore, so they will either give the dog to a family or friend, or they will return the dog to Leader Dog. And again, we have a list of people who want the senior dogs who have gotten done working and are in retirement and just want to live out their lives in luxury. So those are kind of the different options for that. We can move on to the next slide. So this is a breakdown of our training cycle. As I mentioned, it's about 4 months long with 4 different phases of training, which are, again, about a month long. And so we break it down into foundations training, basic training, intermediate, and advanced. And as you can see by this graph, there's a little bit of overlap in between the different phases, because like as you reach the end of basic, you start doing intermediate behaviors and things like that. So foundations training, we're doing a lot of work that the puppy raisers have already done. We're building the relationships with our dogs. We're doing things like their basic obedience and playing games with that and teaching them how to wear a harness. We are working on platform training with the dogs and foundations. When I talk about platform training, we use these foam blocks that are about the length and width of the dog, and we teach them to go walk on top of the platform and stand there. And so this, and we give them lots of positive reinforcement, lots of food if that's what they're into, or a toy, or lots of praise to teach them that's what we really want them to be. Teaching them platforms is a really good foundation to be able to use for other things if necessary, to teach them the positioning of standing right next to the handler. So we get that done in foundations. It's also a great starting point for teaching our dogs to choose to go to the platform. We want it to be such a positive thing that the dog isn't even really waiting for us to say, go find the platform. We want them to really want to get there, to build that initiative in the guide dogs. That is a huge difference between guide dogs and service dogs. Other types of service dogs is that many service dogs are responding to a very specific stimuli or a specific cue from a handler, and the dog is responding to that. Where guide dogs are responding to cues from handlers, but they also have to be observing the environment and the situation, and sometimes have to make decisions on their own for the betterment of the team, even if in a situation where the handler might not perceive what's happening, or might not perceive like a car is passing and they tell the dog to go forward. The dog has to know to make its own decision based on the environment, if that's the case. So long story short, the platform is a great way to start that. They're evaluated at the end of foundations for a foundations evaluation, just to see how everything is going with their obedience and general handling. And then we go into basic training, where we move from guiding to the platforms and stopping on them to actually guiding to a real street curb in the sidewalk, because guide dogs work curb to curb. You get to the edge of the sidewalk, they stop so that the handler knows there's a street ahead of them. And then at that point, the handler makes the decision of whether to cross the street, and they make the decision of when to cross the street, that it's a safe crossing, or to turn and go down a different path. So that's a big part of basic training. We introduce obstacles in basic training. Partial obstacles are what are partially over the sidewalk, and the dogs will just weave around them naturally. A full obstacle goes all the way across the sidewalk, and the dog stops to indicate the obstacle. Client feels that an obstacle is there, and then the dog safely guides them around that obstacle. For full obstacles, it may be something low, or our dogs also have to learn to think about things that are up in the air above them, like a tree branch or something like that. So we have to teach the dogs to be aware of something that might be above their normal plane of vision, but would hit the handler. So we call those overhead obstacles. I have a picture of one later on. They have a mid-cycle evaluation, very similar to the foundations evaluation, but it's actually on a guiding route where they're guiding their handler, which is the instructor at this point in time. We move to intermediate, where we're teaching about traffic and adding some more distractions. And then in advanced training, it's sort of all of these skills that we've built early on, but we're moving to various environments at that point in time. All right, didn't cover quite all of them, but just a general covering. We can move to the next slide. So positive reinforcement behaviors that we teach in our different phases. As I said, in foundations, we do, sit down, stay, impulse control, platforms, basic, we're doing that finding the curb. Intermediate, we're doing obstacle avoidance. We teach the dogs to find chairs or doors, etc. This is something that's super fun to the dogs, to find chairs. It's funny, usually after we teach them how to find a chair, then the next route I go on, the dogs want to show me every single chair that they can find because they're so excited about it. And this is really helpful for clients because as they go into a room, they can tell the dog, find me a chair, and the dog has learned how to find an empty chair, not a chair with somebody already sitting in it. And this is also a skill that the clients can use to teach the dog how to find like their classroom if they're a student, or their specific seat, or the door to their doctor's office. It's a very applicable skill that the clients use a lot, so they don't have to be feeling for that specific object all the time. And again, in advance, we're generalizing all these different behaviors. We start in a small town, and then we might move to a bigger town. We go to malls, we go to stores. Again, in the current environment, we're restricted a little bit, but we're doing our best to be creative. So we can move on to the next slide. So I mentioned traffic, and that the dogs have to learn that cars are not a scary thing, but if a car pulls out in front of them, or if their client thinks they've perceived a safe street crossing and they say forward, and there is a car that is crossing in front of them, the dog does not go. So in this set of pictures, we have a trainer with a lovely golden retriever. Is walking down the sidewalk. One of our leader dog vehicles pulls out in front of the team. I should say, before we do this, we also have taught the dogs where we want them to stop, that we don't want them to stop right up next to the car. We show them with a little bit of a leash cue and reward them to show this is where we want them to stop. So when we do practice, the car pulls up in front. The dog, as you can see in the bottom middle picture, has stopped with plenty safe distance to keep them safe. And the car moves away and they go on their merry way and they haven't been hit. Move to the next one. So this is a picture of the overhead obstacle that I mentioned. Again, the dogs have to learn to stop for things that might be above their eyesight that they could easily go underneath, but the handler could not. And this is one that we have here at Leader Dog, where it's a pipe with some foam on it, and it's actually on a rope. So when we're first teaching the dogs, we will put that overhead obstacle kind of right at their nose and eyesight, so they learn it's there, they stop for it, and then as we're teaching them, we put it up farther and farther so that they learn to look up at it. So that is a picture of one of our guide dog instructors indicating the obstacle. The dog did a good job for stopping for it. So then positive reinforcement is also really helpful for problem solving different behaviors. Some dogs take a little bit of time to get acclimated to our equipment, or so we'll use our clicker and food reward to help the dogs get used to that, or booties or a gentle leader. Some dogs need to be reminded to walk in a straight line down the middle of the sidewalk, which, bless our dogs, I'm surprised that more dogs don't need more help with this than they do, because we ask them to do some fairly unnatural things as far as a normal dog goes. We're asking them to walk straight down the middle of the sidewalk, not meander and sniff a bunch of things, not say hi to the people or the dogs that pass, or the squirrels that I swear know that these are guide dogs and don't go after them, so they get like extra excited in front of the dogs, but they can't go towards them. So our dogs are very good about that. Pace and pull. Sometimes our dogs don't put enough tension in the harness, so we'll do what we call click for lead, where the second the dog does, we click them to teach them, yes, I want you to put a little bit of pressure in the harness, so that the client, eventually, who's visually impaired, will be able to feel the dog pulling them along. And any extra behaviors that we might teach the dogs for the specific client. We have an adaptive services team that works with people who are both blind and deaf, so sometimes they will teach those dogs to respond to a doorbell. I'm working with a dog right now whose handler has a autistic son, so we're working with the dog just a little bit on some different things that will help with the bonding of that group. So we can move on to the next slide. These are just some pictures of some other extra things that we'll teach or expose the dogs to based on the handler that we're matching the dog to. So we have clients who live on farms or go near farms. So the first picture is a golden who is saying hello to a horse on the other side of the fence to make sure the dog isn't afraid of horses before it goes to a rural area. And the second picture is of one of our instructors who this particular dog was going to a client who pushed children in a stroller. So we're getting the dog used to that. You can go to the next slide. So that's a picture of myself and one of my dogs before a blindfold walk. We do work the dogs with blindfolds on sometimes to make sure that they are doing all of their tasks when we can't see it all, and make sure that we're not influencing the dogs at all. And the next picture is just showing we work in all different weather, rain or shine or snow. So this is actually one of our German Shepherd crosses. We have labs, golden retrievers, German Shepherds, and crosses of labs and goldens and labs and German Shepherds. So that was a cross that I had recently in the snow, which she gets a lot of now because she now lives in the mountains. So our ultimate goal is to create dogs that are happy and eager to be guide dogs. They love their work, they love working for their clients, and that they do safe, effective, and independent travel with their handler and their successful teams together for a long time, which ultimately leads to independence of that client they may not have had before that this dog now provides to them. So we're very grateful for our wonderful guide dogs. And that took me right up to about 2:30. So I want to make sure I left a little bit of time for questions. So these are pictures of some of our international clients. We had one group go to Chicago for big city training. So that is me following one of our clients in Chicago. And the second picture is a group of clients towards the end of class. We did a little group travel in Detroit. So that is a bunch of them walking successfully with our guide dogs in Detroit. I do not have audio.
Okay.
Here we go.
Our apprentice, so one of the questions is, are apprentice instructors required to be blindfolded for an extended period of time at Leader Dogs as part of their own training program?
That is a great question. Yes, we are. So part of our apprenticeship is you spend a week with the O&M team where you put a blindfold on during the day and learn some basic cane and orientation skills. And then we also spend, the time has varied over time, but so I had to spend 3 days with a blindfold on the entire time, where I went into class just like a client would, and I was issued a dog that I didn't know, I had never worked with, and sort of had to go through the process of being in class and doing things and learning this new dog with a blindfold on. So yes, we do have to spend quite a bit of time with a blindfold on. Great question.
Okay, we have a question here from Deborah. What does the CR and the different numbers mean? I hope you know what that means, because I don't.
CR and the different numbers. Is there a certain slide? Oh, I see what they're talking about. I think that's just referring to some of our text. There's nothing specific with that.
Somebody asked about, can you explain a little bit more about what the career change dog is?
Yeah, so a career change dog is a dog that either for health reasons or behavior reasons, we frankly have dogs sometimes that just don't want to do the work of being a guide dog. So it is determined through training, either at a health evaluation or based on the behaviors that they're showing in training, that it's just best that they do not become a guide dog. It's the best thing for them. So we do an evaluation on the dogs at that point in time to see if they fit into an alternative career. Some of those are like scent detection or explosive detection. We work with a program for dogs that frankly would rather just like hang out and be loved on and don't want to go out and do these long walks, that we work with a program called CAP for dogs that go and sit in the courtroom with children who have to testify in court. So we'll have the dogs go do that. We have dogs that sometimes will just go to a different service organization to try and do a different job, or if kind of none of those things would be a good fit for that dog, then they go up for general adoption and are adopted as pets.
Great. What is Leader Dog's stance on canes? Are clients who enter with canes weaned off of its usage? Are canes used in conjunction with the dog or ever taught together?
Ooh, that's a great question. So it's funny, history has changed a lot, where when people used to get guide dogs, they would come into class to get their dog and their cane would be taken away from them and told, you're never going to need this ever again, don't worry about your cane. Now we have progressed and gotten smarter and realized that yes, a cane is still a great tool to use. So if clients are healing their dogs without the harness on, sometimes they'll use their cane. We encourage the clients to always carry their cane with them, because they might encounter a situation in the environment where there might be an obstruction that wasn't there before, where it might be a good idea to let go of the harness handle of the dog and just have them on leash and take their cane out and kind of figure out what's going on before they proceed. So canes are absolutely still helpful with guide dogs. Great question.
So Cynthia wants to know, why do they always train on the left side of the person?
Also a good question. They're typically trained on the left side. And I honestly think that's just historically what has been done. I don't know that there's a specific, like, this is why we keep doing it. And then we have a lot of commands with the hand that we use in conjunction with verbal. And so we'll do a right-handed command with those. We do sometimes, if somebody for like a medical reason has a like weak left arm, prefers to have the dog in their on the right side, we will switch the dog over to the right side, which is always far easier for the dogs than for us, because then of course all of the cues with your hand switches, and so we struggle with that, but the dogs are like, whatever, I'm on the other side now. Fine. So
Trish just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to share your passion with us.
Of course. I could talk all day.
Somebody wants to know, how much does the training cost?
Ooh, great question. So, man, these are all so good. So if you count out the breeding, the puppy raising, the training for the dog, bringing the client in and housing them here while we instruct them, the dog itself, each dog handler team, when they graduate, it's about $40,000, but it costs nothing to the clients. No part of it has to be paid for. They get the dog, their flights or however they get here is covered, their stay here is covered, everything we run by donations, and everything is fully covered for the client, so they do not have to pay for their dogs or any after service we provide them if they need help with something. Everything is free for them.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How are dogs trained to guide handler around an object without the handler bumping into it?
So the dogs are trained to approach an object if there's not enough space to get around it. As I said, if it's a partial obstacle, the dog will just go around it or indicate it. So we teach them at first to sort of acknowledge the amount of space that we take up by leash cueing them and helping teach them this is how far I want you to go around an object. When there's we have construction barrels that we practice with. As we're approaching this construction barrel, I need you to not just go far enough for you, you have to compensate for me now too. So we teach them with a leash and guide them around. And once we get to the point where we can tell that they know that's how far they need to go over, if in the future they don't go over quite far enough, we will, even if I can see it coming, I will let myself kind of brush up against it or brush against it. So the dogs learn this person can't perceive that that's there. So they really learn I need to get around it or my handler might bump up against it.
It's amazing how perceptive they are. It's really impressive. Another comment, really enjoying the presentation. Thank you. Another question, with COVID, is Leader Dogs able to have clients and dogs?
Yeah, so the COVID situation has been as crazy as it has been for everyone. So we did have a period of time where we were not having any clients on campus. So most of our dogs actually went to volunteer rehomes during that period of time. We did a little bit of training, but not a lot. And then we would kind of just, the dogs that were left here, all of the staff were just helping take care of everyone, do a little bit of training. And now all the dogs have come back and we are having classes. The class that is in right now, this is their actually final week of class. This morning was the clients. I talked to a couple of them. They were excited. This is their last rounds with their dogs before they went home. So we are, and my class goes in next month, September 20th. So I'm the third class to go in since we've been able to start doing classes again. And we just have to obviously have a lot more things in place. We have much smaller numbers, like instead of me having 4 clients and we have 2, we have capacity limits for rooms, so we don't have everybody in there at once. We've taken a lot of different precautions now for how we handle it. We're only taking clients from certain states at the moment, making sure that everything is safe. We unfortunately aren't taking any international clients right now, which is a huge bummer because we get a lot of clients from Spain and different places, so we miss them. We can't have them for at least a year, but so we're trying to do the best we can to serve people in the circumstances and get these dogs out working. So
yeah. So do you have time for a few more questions? Because we've got a lot of questions still. Yep. Okay. Okay. What would you say is the hardest thing for the dogs to learn?
Oh, interesting. The hardest thing for the dogs to learn, I would say, is getting over distractions, like getting to a level where they, don't go after the squirrel, and having impulse control. Either that or learning about the overhead obstacles and that you have to look up a little bit as well as out and around.
Yeah. So Lynn has a question. Why use a clicker and not just say yes for training?
So we find that we like the clicker because it's the same tone every single time. So it makes it really clear and consistent. And it's so quick that you can really capture the behavior right when it happens. We do wean off the clicker through training. So we use it just as we're teaching a behavior. And then once the dog gets that, we will move to just using verbal and praise and giving them food, and then we move back then to where we're still giving the dogs food. Sometimes that occur, but not every time. We call it random reinforcement. So they're always getting a verbal praise and like a scratch on the butt or something, but we move away from the clicker and then away from constant food. And of course, if the dog, bless Labradors, they're pretty much always excited by food, of course. So that works very well for most dogs, but sometimes they don't care as much about food. So we either find a higher value food, or some of them want a little tug toy, or we find what works best for that dog.
Okay, how many blind or vision impaired students attend the white cane training first, and then to get more O&M skills training, and then come back to receive a guide dog from Leader Dogs?
That's a good question. I don't actually have that percentage with me off the top of my head, and I don't want to give you a wrong number. I can find it and email it out to you or the specific person, but in general, it's not uncommon. I feel like every O&M group that comes in, there's at least 1 or 2 out of the 4 or 5 that come in that are interested in a guide dog eventually, and they might do like a guide dog walk at the end of their week here. So it's quite a few of them that are interested in a future guide dog, but not all of them.
So Christiana wants to know, are new dogs divided among GDMIs randomly or by their traits, e.g. size or temperament?
Mostly randomly, but we do divide. So we don't want we divide breeds. So we don't want someone typically to only have labs and then this person only has golden retrievers. We kind of mix that up. We'll also mix up siblings. So one person doesn't have everybody in a certain litter. So we do things sort of based on that, but not necessarily their traits.
And then there's a question, do you have a campus in Florida or do you need puppy raisers in Florida?
Absolutely, we need puppy raisers in Florida. We could take any and everybody who wants to apply to be a puppy raiser. We always need more. We don't have a campus in Florida, but we do sometimes offer what we call warm weather training, where we actually will take clients down to Florida and they stay in a hotel area similar to our big city training where we take them to Chicago, we take groups sometimes down to Florida and do warm weather training there.
That's nice. Do you feel like the trainers are integrated with puppy raising, mostly in terms of feedback and helping the puppy raisers be better?
I think so. We have a decent number of trainers who also are puppy raisers, so I think that helps. And then we have a lot of conversations with puppy department on how things are going. We always have a meeting at the beginning when we pick up dogs, and we kind of keep them posted on how things are going. So there's a decent amount of communication between groups.
Somebody wants to know, what's your master's degree and what does O&M stand for?
So O&M stands for Orientation and Mobility. So those are the people who teach blind or visually impaired people how to use their white canes and their orientation skills to safely be able to travel in space. So like the clients that I get as guide dog clients already have to have really good O&M skills to get a guide dog, because a common misconception is you can just tell the dog, like, take me to Starbucks or whatever, and the dog will just take you there and you can just hang on and go. But they have to still have really good orientation skills to problem solve with the dog. So this degree is the teachers who teach those things. So even though I still want to work as a guide dog instructor, it's good knowledge to have. So, and it's a good time in my life to do it. So I started it about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, let me see. There's some more over here. So Britta wants to know, so you do a test on the puppies to identify which ones might work out for the intended purpose. Are there any specific traits in the parent that you're looking for? And I think that we might touch on a lot of that later, right?
I think we will, yeah, but you'll touch on that in a later session.
Somebody wants to say, somebody said they've just recently adopted a career change lab, Harbor, and it's amazing how well trained she is.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad.
We're trying not to undo all the hard work you all put in. What would you say is the hardest, oh, so we got that one. What would you say is the hardest thing when identifying a service dog prospect? When identifying a service dog prospect as a puppy, okay, we're gonna go through that later.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Cheryl, this is recorded and we will make it available soon, hopefully later on this afternoon. Let me see. I think maybe we got everything. Around an object. Somebody asked, could you please share what is platform training? And I know you talked about it a little bit, but maybe just touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah. So platform training is we have a bunch of them now in our basement. We have a big foam block that's about the length and width of the dog. We don't make it much bigger because we're really trying to teach the dog alignment. So when they stand on it straight, all 4 paws are on the platform. But if they stand on it skewed or anything, they'll have paws off the platform. So we use it to teach the dogs alignment, because it's really important that the dogs learn to just naturally, their happy place is right next to the handler, parallel to them. Even if I kind of start moving around, like I'm trying to find a curb with my foot, doing different things, the dog just stays straight. That's their happy place. We do a lot of praise and food, whatever the dog loves, on platforms, because platform training is one of the first times that we are teaching the dogs, like, this is the destination I want you to go to, and this is a great place, and I want you to choose to go there and to drive to go there. So it not only is the basics of their like physical behaviors of aligning with us, but it also establishes the foundations and basics of the mental state of, I want to go to this destination, I'm choosing to take my handler there, and I'm taking the initiative to go to it. It's kind of what we use them for. And then they can be helpful for different problem solving things, that if the dogs already know platforms, we can put them out on the street if we need to, or we can use them in all sorts of different little ways once they have that foundation.
Okay, and then can you please describe intelligent disobedience? And this is, I am amazed by this, so please do describe it.
Yeah, so intelligent disobedience is a phenomenal thing that our dogs are able to do, where they learn, we start with like an obstacle that is, there is space for the dog to get through, but like not enough space for the handler and the dog together to get to. So like the dog approaches the space, they stop, and I'm like feeling around, I can't perceive that the obstacle is there because I just don't do a good enough job of feeling for everything. So I tell the dog to go forward. And the dog, while I said forward, they know that they can't just go through there before I identify it. So they choose to disobey and stand there until I've adequately established what's going on. Or we use it with traffic. So if I'm at a street curb, another misconception is that people all the time ask me how the dogs read traffic lights. They don't. So it is up to the handler to be able to assess when it's safe to cross the street. But everybody messes up with that sometimes. So we teach the dogs that, like, if perchance the handler is standing there thinks, okay, it's safe to cross the street, they tell the dog forward. If a car is coming across them, the dog has to know, I am going to disobey that command and stand here until it is indeed safe for me to cross. So we call that intelligent disobedience, because they're intelligently saying, like, that's not safe for me to do right now. I'm going to choose not to do it. Amazing.
I just think that's fascinating because that's so rare. We don't teach dogs to be disobedient. Like we just teach them the cognitive level that they have to be able to do that. I find that fascinating. Yeah. And then we do have the official answer for the O&M question. Approximately 50% of the O&M clients end up returning for a leader dog. Dana gave that information to us.
That was my guess, but I didn't want to say 50%. So thank you, Dana.
And then we'll just do one last question here. Is there a waiting list to get a leader dog, guide dog, and how big of a waiting list is it?
There is. So it sort of depends on how particular people are of what they want. So, and of course, right now it's different because of coronavirus, where people have to wait for their state to be able to deem that we can take clients from them. But barring that whole situation, clients turn in their applications and they'll state on there if they have a preference of a breed preference or a color preference or gender. Some people, we've literally had people who are like, well, I need a dog that's 30 inches at the shoulder. Some people get very specific on what they want, or they're like German Shepherd only. So the more specific you are and what you want, the longer people will have to wait, because not only then do we have to match those physical characteristics to what you want, but the dog still has to be the right match for you as far as the environment that you live in, the pace that you walk, their size compared to your size. Like all of those things then have to match up instead of just what is the best dog for you. So if somebody's open to anything, it could be as little as soon as they get through the admissions process, so like a few weeks, to, you know, we have people who are German Shepherd only that staunchly only want German Shepherds that could be on the list for over a year, because we only have a handful of Shepherds a year that graduate. And then those Shepherds again have to match that specific person. So depends.
Okay, well, I think that's most of the questions. There's a couple that are really specific that we can just send to you and get the answers for those. And, you know, if anyone has any other questions, like just let us know and we will get those answered. Thank you so much. This was great. Lots of good feedback. We've had lots of people commenting that it was a great session and they really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a good day.
You too.